At first glance, the Boox Note Max might seem like just another e-ink tablet, until you place it next to the Boox Go 10.3. That's when its massive 67% larger 13.3-inch screen really stands out. Its biggest selling point is an almost A4 or letter-sized, crisp 300 ppi display designed for smooth PDF handling and a very spacious note-taking experience. But does a bigger screen actually make it better? With potential drawbacks like ghosting, a glass-back plane, limited ink modes, and a mixed battery performance, smaller tablets might still have the edge. So who is the Boox Note Max really for? And when is a 10-inch model the smarter choice? To not waste the time, here's the upfront conclusion before we dive into the details. But bear with me, because even just summarizing the most important points, there are a couple of things I need to cover to paint a complete picture. First off, the Boox Note Max is a great e-ink tablet, but I'd still only recommend it to a specific audience: students, educators, and researchers. And even then with a few caveats. The best thing about it is without a doubt the 13.3-inch 300 ppi display. Since the screen is almost letter format or A4 sized, it's perfect for handling PDFs. And with the included Wacom pen, you can annotate directly on a page with a very low pen latency, making it a really solid tool for academic work. No need to zoom in, adjust margins, or mess with the settings. Just open a file and everything fits with sharp and crisp text. Perfect for scientific papers and, on first glance, also for sheets of music. But as good as the big screen is for PDFs, it also comes with some trade-offs. The most impactful is ghosting. For scientific PDFs and note-taking, it's not a huge issue since you're staying on the same page for longer and can simply refresh manually when needed. Curiously, for notebooks, ghosting behavior is also better to begin with. But for a music sheet, reading ebooks, and especially when using apps or navigating the UI, where the screen's content updates more frequently, the afterimages can get distracting and manually refreshing the screen gets a bit tedious because it's needed so often. Then there's the size. The big screen is great for reading and writing, but it also makes the tablet far less portable than the many 10-inch tablets on the market. While that may be perfectly obvious just by knowing the screen size, I was still surprised at how big a difference it made in daily use. It's as wide as a MacBook Pro 16 is deep. In my opinion, the Note Max isn't a tablet you casually toss in your bag and carry around daily. It's more of a desk device than a convenient take-everywhere tablet. So if you're thinking about using this not only for studying in one place, but carrying it to classes every day, definitely take this into account. And then there's another obvious limitation: the missing Frontlight. It's not a deal breaker if you're mostly using it in well-lit spaces, but of course it does limit where and when you can use it comfortably. With the price of $650 or 700 euros, the Note Max manages to hit a reasonable price range. Other devices in the 13-inch segment are typically much more expensive. However, that price is anything but cheap. And that brings me to an alternative that might actually be the better choice for many people: the Boox Note Air 4C. It has a Frontlight, but more importantly, it has colors. Why is that important in this context? Because if your intention is to read a lot of PDFs with graphs and images, having colors could be a major advantage, depending on the kind of material you work with, of course. And there's the Boox Go 10.3, which is smaller and only slightly less capable, but it's much cheaper and handling is more convenient thanks to the smaller size. So to sum it up, the Boox Note Max is a fantastic e-ink tablet for students and researchers mainly working with PDFs or taking notes. Its 13.3-inch 300 ppi display eliminates the need for zooming, and the Wacom pen makes annotations seamless. But it comes with trade-offs, with ghosting being the biggest one and also the main reason why I can't recommend the otherwise great tablet to a wider audience. The missing Frontlight and its reduced portability are much smaller cons by comparison, but still also to keep in mind. Battery life is okay, but nothing to brag about. You should get comfortably through a day at work or school while taking notes. That's it for the upfront conclusion. Let me know in the comments below if you like this format, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks for your time watching, and now let's get into the details. Durability is one of my biggest concerns with large e-ink displays, especially since they get more expensive as the screen gets larger. That leads us straight to the glass back plane. The back plane controls the e-ink pixels and sits beneath the front layer of the display. Most e-ink screens, including this one, use a glass back plane, meaning it's rigid and can crack if stressed. Because as we all know, glass is glass and glass breaks. The larger the screen, the greater the risk. That's why a robust frame is essential for devices like this. Thankfully, Boox seems to have done a solid job here. When I applied force to flex the tablet, it held firm with no noticeable movement. Real-world scenarios, like tossing it into a bag, can create torsional forces, so this is crucial for a large format tablet like this. While my test isn't a guarantee the screen won't break, of course, it put my mind at ease and my biggest worry took a back seat. So I kept using the Note Max like any other e-ink tablet and had no issues. If you're still worried, device insurance could give you some peace of mind. Now onto the rest. With the color of the frame and grip area, the Note Max looks very similar to the Go 10.3, which makes me wonder, why can't the company just name their products consistently? What's up with that? Why not just call this the Boox Go 13.3? But aside from the name, there are a couple of differences you'll notice when handling the Note Max. The back is matte plastic without the soft touch inlays of the Go 10.3. Combined with the flat aluminum frame, it feels more premium, almost like an iPad. But at just 4.6mm thick, it's even thinner than the latest iPad Pro or iPad Air, which are 5.1mm and 6.3mm respectively. At roughly 600 grams, it's 15 grams lighter than listed in the specs. That's not exactly lightweight, but the weight is evenly distributed, making it feel lighter than it actually is. The wide grip area also makes it easy to hold without accidental touches. That said, you probably won't hold the Note Max in your hands as often as smaller tablets. As great as the 13.3-inch display is, its sheer size makes it more of a desk-bound device. Holding it for long periods isn't exactly practical. A bigger screen is ideal for certain types of content like large PDFs, but it's a trade-off in portability. Not necessarily a drawback, just something to consider. While the Note Max isn't the most portable, it makes up for that with top-tier hardware. It includes a microphone, stereo speakers, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and 128 gigs of storage, with around 102 gigs usable. And the Snapdragon 855 SoC and 6 gigs of RAM ensures smooth performance, which makes it one of the fastest in the e-ink space. What's missing is a fingerprint sensor in the power button, like on the recent Note Air devices. That feature makes password protection much more convenient, and honestly, I was surprised to see it missing on one of Boox's pricier devices. On the plus side, the USB-C port is positioned on the bottom left below the grip area, making it more accessible than the one on the side on the Note Air tablets. Turning the Note Max reveals the pogo pins on the side, which are needed for the keyboard cover, and that brings me to my first real complaint. The keyboard cover is a great idea, but unfortunately poorly executed. The angle isn't adjustable, the case feels flimsy when closed, and worst of all, the keyboard rests directly on the screen, increasing the risk of scratches. Setting it up is easy, but the fixed angle limits comfort. I think Boox should have used the design from the Tab Ultra C Pro, where the pogo pins are on the back, allowing for an adjustable stand. On the bright side, the keyboard itself is comfortable to type on, and while only a QWERTY version is available, switching the language in the settings changes the layout. However, the keyboard rubbing against the screen is definitely a concern. Unlike the scratch-resistant Boox Tab models, the Note Max has a paper-like screen texture that's not scratch-resistant, so over time, using the keyboard cover could lead to scratches. So if you're considering the Note Max for typing, I'd recommend skipping the keyboard cover and go for a compact Bluetooth keyboard with the standard folio instead. Not only is it more stable, but it also lets you adjust the viewing angle in 2 levels with these grooves right here. And putting the external keyboard right in front of the tablet, you can even adjust the angle further. The only downside of this setup is the slightly added lag, but that's a small trade-off if you ask me. And that brings us to the 13.3-inch e-ink Carta 1300 display. Carta 1300 is the best e-ink technology you can get right now, with great contrast levels and quick response times. When the tablet launched, there was controversy over the display's background brightness looking rather dark in some pictures. But at least on my unit, it's barely darker than the Boox Go 10.3. The difference is so small, it's hard to spot in direct comparison, and readability is excellent. Let's quickly compare the Note Max to the Boox Go 10.3, Supernote Manta and VWood's AI Paper. Not side by side, but at the exact same position, with the same distances to my studio lights. As you can see, the differences between the 4 devices, both for white and for black, are fairly small, resulting in very similar contrast levels. So in short, while the slightly brighter background on the smaller devices might seem more comfortable at first glance, it doesn't significantly change contrast levels. so readability is essentially the same. So just one thing to keep in mind here. E-ink displays have a lot of variance, so we'll definitely see contradicting information. But in my experience, contrast levels remain mostly unaffected by variations in brightness because both background and black pixels shift equally. So my advice is don't obsess over minor differences if you're generally happy with readability. Side by side with real paper, the Note Max is obviously not as bright, but in screen estate and resolution, it's a fantastic substitute. With 3200 x 2400 pixels at 300 ppi, text is razor sharp even when small. And comparing the Note Max side by side with a letter format or A4 paper page, you can see the appeal of the tablet right away. This is essentially a no-compromise reading experience for this format. And the paper-like display texture also reduces glare effectively. So that's another win for the Note Max when it comes to the reading experience. However, there are two drawbacks. The first one is obvious. Its lack of a built-in Frontlight. While intentional for a more paper-like feel, it means you need ambient lighting. Compared to the Note Air 3, where a small Frontlight boost improves readability in dim conditions, this might be a deal breaker for some. That said, since this is more of a desk device already, a simple desk lamp does the job. The second issue, on the other hand, was unexpected and might be a deal breaker for some: ghosting. It was also the reason why I waited a bit longer than usual to publish this review. I expected Boox to follow up with another update after providing one directly after launch. But as of yet, that didn't happen. So what am I talking about? Ghosting is just a limitation of e-ink in general and results in after images after changing the screen contents. But it's more noticeable on the Note Max than on many other devices. Even flipping ebook pages leaves pretty obvious after images, which even allow me to easily read what was on the previous page. Changing the refresh mode improves this slightly, but at the cost of text clarity. And also it's still not enough to not be distracting in my opinion. I'm not super sensitive to ghosting on e-ink and can usually see past it when using the device, but on the Note Max I honestly had a hard time doing that. The only reliable fix is manually refreshing the screen, which gets rid of ghosting reliably. I can live with that as a workaround in large format PDFs because I typically stay on those pages longer and hitting the refresh button once in a while doesn't really hurt. But when reading an ebook, navigating the UI or using dynamic apps, with more frequent content updates, I found the need to manually refresh the screen a bit tiresome because I had to do it so often. With Notes on the other hand, ghosting isn't that big of a deal to begin with, because for some reason ghosting behavior is significantly better inside of notebooks. That gives me hope that Boox can reduce ghosting throughout the system further with future updates. But as always, don't buy something on hopes or promises, and just go by what it can do right now. I'll add a comment to this video if something changes regarding ghosting. So think about your primary use case for the Note Max and if you're willing to compromise on ghosting. Now onto the Note Max's biggest strength, the writing experience. The display's paper-like texture provides just the right amount of friction, making the writing feel natural. It's an almost identical writing feel when comparing it to the Boox Go 10.3. But the 17 milliseconds pen latency is nearly half that of the Go 10.3's 30 milliseconds, making note-taking incredibly smooth. And the missing frontlet also reduces pen to pixel distance, enhancing the paper-like feel. The included Boox Pen Plus is okay, but I'm not a big fan of the ripped plastic. And it lacks an eraser. Fortunately, it attaches magnetically with stronger magnets than the Go 10.3, making it less likely to fall off. For the best experience, I'd still recommend upgrading to the Boox Pen 2 Pro. Finally, the Note Max only has 2 e-ink modes instead of 4. Initially, I thought this was a weird choice, but I actually came to appreciate the reduced complexity. Boox should simplify its interface further, and I found that having just 2 well-working modes doesn't hurt usability noticeably in my opinion. And that brings us to the Android user interface. The Boox Note Max runs Android 13, which is heavily customized for the e-ink screen. So everything is high contrast and easy to read. And there's also Google Play support, so you can install apps very easily through the Play Store. The security patch version right now is October 2024, which is not terrible, but at the time of recording in February 2025, it could be better. So hopefully Boox will continue to provide the Note Max and other tablets with updates in the future. But make no mistake, even though this is running Android 13, it's not your typical Android experience. For one, Android wasn't designed to run on e-ink. So even though installing apps is easy, thanks to the Google Play integration, you often need to tinker a bit for apps to run comfortably well. That's why you need the mentioned viewing mode switch. Because most apps rely on scrolling or have some other animations, you often need to switch to the faster A2 mode to use an app. Many apps are also not optimized for the grayscale display, and as a consequence, at least some need contrast adjustments to be usable properly. Beyond app compatibility, Boox offers a ton of customization, but it's not the most intuitive when you're first getting started with the Note Max. There is definitely a bit of a learning curve. It's not super hard to get into, but as I said, it's not your typical Android experience neither. One other thing I'll keep mentioning until Boox implements an opt-out is the phoning home issue. Obviously, Android is a chatty operating system that constantly communicates with Google. The Boox Note Max is no exception. But besides calling Google, it's also phoning home to Chinese servers. It's not exactly clear why, and I'm not saying there's something notorious going on. It's probably just for the typical usage statistics tracking. But still, on a device to store a lot of personal handwritten information, I feel like any outside communication, besides my actively using cloud services, should be reduced to an absolute minimum, and I'd like to see an opt-out option for that. Before coming to note-taking, I want to first talk about PDF handling, because that's the most important use case for the Note Max in my opinion. And it's also pretty simple. Open a PDF and you're good to go. As you can see, a page in the Note Max is essentially the same as a letter format or A4 page. And the text sharpness is also excellent thanks to the 3 ppi. So without cropping page margins, zooming in, or doing any other adjustments, this is a super convenient solution to read PDFs. Perfect for large format PDFs, like scientific papers and sheets of music, for example. But we're not done yet. Even though it's not really necessary, you still can tinker with the options a bit. Cropping the page margins zooms in, improving readability of the tiny text of this paper, for example. And if that's not enough, you can also use the columns mode that I always highlight as my favorite PDF feature on Boox devices. This splits the page into sections, letting you navigate through them seamlessly. It's an awesome feature for scientific papers, and while it's not really needed on the Note Max, it definitely improves readability a lot. So if you're tired of reading papers with that tiny text, this is a convenient and well-working solution. You can annotate these PDFs directly with a pen, which also works great. These notes are saved directly in the PDF, so after transferring the file back to the computer, you can continue working with it. So short of colors, this is hands down the best PDF experience on e-ink you can get right now. Which brings us to the note-taking app, which is the most feature-packed experience you can get on e-ink right now. Beyond the usual features like different pen types, layers, shapes, templates, and audio recording, you can also link files, websites, and notebook pages. A feature that was introduced with the Note Air 4C is the ability to add an outline to a page, allowing you to create a table of contents for an entire notebook. While it's not as seamless as what Supernote offers, it's still a great tool for organizing notes. At the same time, because outlines are independent of page content, they offer more flexibility for structuring large documents, something power users will appreciate. What's also better with Boox's solution is the fact that the outline is saved as bookmarks in an exported PDF. So opening an exported notebook as a PDF on the computer still gives you access to that outline, significantly improving usability of large files. You can also convert your handwriting to typed text, which after first enabling the OCR function online, works offline directly on the device. It's also possible to search for something in your handwritten notes. For sketching, the tablet also supports pressure and tilt sensitivity for selected brush types, making it a solid option for digital drawing as well. My only issue with note-taking is palm rejection not blocking the activation of the system navigation reliably. Because the display is so large, I rest part of my forearm on the bottom edge of the screen. And moving my hand and arm sometimes triggers the navigation, both with the virtual buttons or the gestures. Not a huge deal, but those micro interruptions when writing can be a bit annoying nonetheless. The note-taking app has received some refinements over previous versions as well. One small but noticeable improvement is that the labels are now shortened when they are too long instead of being cut off awkwardly by the screen's edge. It's a small tweak, but it shows a bit more polish than before. As for syncing, you can back up your notes using an Onyx account with the option to choose between the US, European, or Boox's default servers for cloud storage. And not to forget, there's also a note type for typed text. so a basic word processor, which is a solid pick in combination with the keyboard cover or another keyboard. You could also install Microsoft Word for Android if you needed more options. You can of course also read regular ebooks on the Note Max. The built-in library provides useful filtering and sorting options, and the reading app includes essential features like multiple text styling options, note-taking, and a dictionary lookup. By default, it uses an online dictionary for definitions, but you can also add local dictionaries, though you'll need to sideload them manually, which can be a bit of a hassle when finding the right sources. Boox has redesigned its text styling options to work more like what you see in Kindles. You can customize fonts, spacing, and layout, then save your settings as a theme, making it easy to switch between different reading preferences. There's also a built-in text-to-speech function that uses Android's default speech synthesis. While it doesn't sound as natural as a professionally recorded audiobook, it's useful if you want to continue in a book without looking at the screen, or if you're learning a new language, for example. You can even download additional voices, languages, and dialects for a more customized experience. Let's hear how it sounds.
The evening altogether passed off pleasantly to the whole family. Mrs. Bennet had seen her eldest daughter much admired by the Netherfield party. Mr. Bingley had danced with her twice, and she had been distinguished by his sisters. Jane was as much gratified by this as her mother could be. Though in a quieter way, Elizabeth felt Jane's pleasure. Mary had heard herself mentioned to Miss Bingley as the most accomplished girl in the neighbourhood, and Catherine and Lydia had been fortunate enough to be never without partners.
When it comes to battery, the Note Max delivers up to 7 hours of continuous writing time, which is decent but not outstanding. For reading, the battery lasts up to 18 hours with a page turn interval of 15 seconds and a full page refresh every 5 pages. Without automatically refreshing the screen, battery life increases just slightly to around 19 hours. So all in all, that's okay, but leans more towards the lower end for e-ink tablets, which is a bit of a letdown considering there would have been enough space for a larger battery in a huge device like this. When using apps, battery life can vary a lot, highly dependent on the apps in question. So there's unfortunately not a good way to test this reliably. However, as a pointer, we can use battery drain when playing back a full-screen YouTube video, which is obviously not something you do on a device like this. But that continuous fast screen update draws a lot of energy, for which the Note Max manages a runtime of roughly 6 hours. So that's probably the shortest runtime you can push the battery with normal use. Okay, so you've already heard the upfront conclusion in the beginning. As you can see, the Boox Note Max comes with a great feature set and hard-to-beat PDF and note-taking capabilities. It truly excels at handling large format PDFs. I know I'm repeating myself, but the fact that you can read those files without zooming, rotating, or tweaking settings is an advantage that can't be overstated. Just open a document and you're good to go. And its simplified e-ink viewing modes actually add to that more streamlined experience. Note-taking is also excellent, be it inside of PDFs or in the notebooks. However, ghosting is a drawback that can't simply be ignored. It's possible to work around it, but personally I found it to be frustrating having to deal with that level of ghosting. If that's a deal breaker, you'll have to wait for yourself. But even with that drawback, the Boox Note Max is most likely the best e-ink note-taking tablet for academia. Reading and annotating large documents is a joy, and simply no other e-ink device handles it that well, as long as you don't intend to carry it with you all of the time. If you need something more portable for daily carry, the Boox Go 10.3, Note Air 4C, and others in the smaller 10 to 11-inch size segment are a better fit. So would you get the Boox Note Max, or do you think smaller tablets are more practical? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like this review, like and subscribe, it really helps. Thanks for your time watching, and I'll see you in the next one.